Welcome again. Sorry for the delay and the technical difficulty and kind of pushed us a little far behind, but welcome to the future of the Boulder City Historic Preservation Committee meeting of May 27th, 2020 at now it's 7:23. We're just beginning, so you haven't missed anything if you just tuned in. And pursuant to Section 3 of the Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, there will be no in-person attendance at this meeting. The public may view this meeting live on the city's website on the City Council page, by the way. Items on the, and then there also be, note there will be public comment at the beginning of the meeting for items on the agenda and at the end of the meeting for any items on the agenda or not on the agenda. So there'll be two places for public comment, okay? So items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. Two or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're good, right? So at this time, we'd like to ask for public comment. You can dial 702-589-9629. That's 702-589-9629 to make any comments on agenda items. And we'll wait 30 seconds for the delay. So if you want to make a public comment, now's your time. Just probably know there were no written comments sent in, no emails or. It's basically 30 seconds. Shall we close public comments? We have anything coming in? Wait a bit. Okay, okay, the number is 702-589-9629. That's 702-589-9629 for public comment on any item on the agenda. You can have up to 5 minutes to speak. Okay, seeing that there doesn't seem to be any public comment, we'll move on to the agenda. Agenda for possible action. Approval of the minutes of the February 26, 2020 regular meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Passed unanimously. For possible action, review and recommendation of proposed new garage at 623 Avenue F relative to adopted exterior design guidelines for accessory buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The owner of 623 Avenue F, Vernon Kenny Reinhardt, plans to build a detached garage within the rear yard. And as a reminder, any remodels or additions which comply with all of the adopted guidelines do not have to come before the committee for review. In this case, review by the committee is required per the code before the building permit can be issued. And it's required in this case because the garage is going to access Avenue F rather than the alley to the rear. But as you can see from the information in the file, there is already an existing paved driveway off of Avenue F, and per aerial photos, that driveway has been paved for years, and an unpaved driveway appeared to be in that same location leading from the street for many years prior to that. Other than the access to the street, all other features of the proposed garage are proposed to be same as or resembling the home per the owner. And as noted in the report, actually the home on this property is not the original home because the prior home was destroyed by fire, and so the current home was built in 2003. However, the current home does actually have the stucco finish on the walls, which is actually what the guidelines do recommend for this area. So at this point, we're going to give the owner a phone call if he's still hanging around and see if you've got any questions or comments for him.
Okay.
Hello.
Mr. Reinhardt,
Yes, this is me.
we are on your agenda item. Susan has just provided an overview, and it's your opportunity to provide additional commentary regarding the proposal. So if you want to go ahead.
I have no additional commentary. I thought Susan did a good job.
All right, then.
So we do have a viewer.
Chairman, if you have questions for the applicant.
I don't have any questions. I have a comment because the house was basically reconstructed. I mean, it was burnt down and a new house was put in its place. What I see there, although it doesn't really contribute, except for the stucco, to the historic significance of the neighborhood, it actually improves the look because it takes away the temporary look of some of the storage buildings and makes a more permanent garage-looking building, which I think fits in with the neighborhood. I drove by the house today, and I think it would make it look better myself. Any comments from this committee?
I just had one question. What is the overall height of the building? I see the wall is 8 feet, but with the roof, top of the roof, what's the overall height of that of the new building?
Are you guys ready for me? I'm sorry. There's like a lag. I turned off my computer. I'm just trying to hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. Did you hear the
I'm sorry.
question from Committee Member Davenport?
Yes, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. So it's 18 feet wide. It's a 412 pitch, which is what the pitch of my house is. So I'm just going to do some quick math. 9 feet would be halfway through.
It should be about 11 feet tall to the peak.
I haven't done the math, but yeah, if the walls are 8 feet and it's a 412 pitch, so 4 inches so 36. So 36 plus 8, that's 3. It's 11 feet.
11 feet. Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Okay. Well, with no comments, is there a motion that we have to make on this, approving these plans?
You don't normally make a motion. You can just state whether or not there are any recommendations or not.
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. Feel free to
Thank you,
submit.
guys. I'm sorry I wasn't more prepared.
That's
Nope,
okay.
thank you.
We
You were
were
great.
dealing with technical difficulties.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, for possible action, discussion on update of 1983 Janus Associates, Inc. survey of the historic district with Courtney Mooney, Northwind Resource Consulting, LLC.
Mr. Chairman, I'll provide a very brief overview, and then I will turn it over to Courtney Mooney, who will be calling in and providing a presentation to the committee. So, as you are all very familiar with, this is the effort to update the Janus report from 1983. Northwind Consulting, Resource Consulting, conducted the survey of the historic district in March, and Courtney is ready to present preliminary findings to the committee and answer any questions. So with that, I'm going to call her.
Hi, this is Courtney.
Courtney, it is Michael. How are you doing? I have you. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just gonna say, we are on agenda item 3, and we're gonna get the PowerPoint presentation set up. And I guess if the committee has any initial questions for Courtney, otherwise we'll have her go through her presentation, then you could ask questions. Okay, so Courtney, we have the PowerPoint going. I know with a 30-second delay, you won't be able to see it in real time, but if you want to just start your presentation and let me know when to change the slide, I will do that.
Okay, that sounds great. And if you need to interrupt me for any reason, if I'm going too fast or I've advanced slides without letting you know or something, just go ahead and feel free to interrupt. So, hello everyone. It's really nice to be here and be able to present this information to the committee. I just wanted to give you guys, start with a little bit of background. Northwind Resource Consulting was contracted by the city of Boulder City to conduct a historic survey of the existing Boulder City Historic District. The survey area matched the district boundaries, which are generally bounded by the Government Center and Water Tank Hill on the north, the Railroad Spur and Date Street on the west, New Mexico and 5th Streets on the south, and avenues B, F, and L on the east. Michael, we should be on slide 2, I should note, that has the district boundaries and the summary. The district was listed in the National Register in 1983 for its association with the Boulder Canyon Project and the construction of Hoover Dam, also as the first fully developed experiment in new town planning as promoted by the community planning movement and for its architectural integrity. So within the district, there are residential, commercial, and public buildings that are constructed from the early 1930s to current. The period of significance, as defined by the National Register nomination, is 1931 to 1945, and it includes 6 major categories of development. These are the government residential, operational, and maintenance properties, 6 companies residential and operational properties, Babcock and Wilcox Company residential properties, power operators field operations properties, the institutional, public, and semi-public properties, and commercial and private residential properties. So a survey of 516 properties and the National Register nomination form was completed for the district in April of 1982 by Janus Associates for the city of Boulder City. And since that time, the city has requested an updated inventory to review any changes since 1982 and potentially incorporate the findings into a community-wide historic preservation plan. So Northwind conducted our survey in March of this year, and we began completing the individual architectural resource assessment forms as required by the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office for each property. 2 examples of these forms were provided to the committee for this meeting. Each form requires a determination of whether a property is considered contributing or non-contributing to a potential district based on criteria, which I will explain in the following slides. The 1982 survey found that 270 were intact, 176 had compatible alterations, which makes 446 contributing properties total, and 68 were non-contributing due to incompatible alterations. That's about an 86% contributing rate. Northwind's preliminary findings show approximately 251 properties are contributing, 222 are non-contributing, and 39 are pending additional information. And of these, approximately 17 properties are considered individually eligible for listing in the National Register. And that's about a 48% contributing rate. So some of the challenges that we faced was the timing of the project. Unfortunately, due to the outbreak of COVID-19, we were not able to access museums and libraries to conduct archival research. Online historic images of the homes as originally constructed, as well as historic aerials of Boulder City and other important materials were extremely limited. And the original property forms completed in 1982 didn't include building descriptions. So this made our evaluations of integrity reliant upon field observations, meaning we had to use our best educated guess based on experience and reviewing similar properties within the same areas of Boulder City to determine what may or may not have been alterations on each property. And I'll just take a quick second to acknowledge historian Dennis McBride here, because he gave me a personal tour to try to help me out with some of this and gave us some materials just yesterday that had some information on what the original buildings would look like. So that's just a little bit of a summary and a background of the survey. And then, excuse me, if we go to the next slide, I can talk about the criteria. So the National Register Historic District criteria for contributing and non-contributing buildings. For a historic district, typically you would like to see about 51% of the contributing properties, so a majority of the properties within the boundaries of the district, they should be contributing. For individual buildings, how we looked at them was they would have to have been constructed within the period of significance as defined by the original nomination. They would possess one or more criteria of significance, which is from the National Register, criteria A, B, and or C. And they must retain sufficient historic integrity to convey that significance. So up to 2 modifications in the materials or design, if they are in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards, is considered acceptable. Does any member of the committee have any questions about the criteria A, B, or C?
So basically, you're saying that we have fallen below the 51% threshold?
Well, we don't.
For historic districts?
It's about 48% right now. But again, some of the information that we're missing is really critical to we need to go back and review all of the properties once we've had a chance to access some of the archives and make sure that we were making the right decision. Mm-hmm. So again, these numbers are preliminary and it can go kind of either way. So I just want to make sure that's clear, because it could go towards being more contributing than non-contributing, but we don't know yet without having access to certain materials.
Right. I have one question. There was a document that I passed on to you, Michael, on a 1960 survey during the corporation, that Alan Stromberg had supplied us with. She got that information, right?
Yeah, I passed it along to Courtney.
Yes.
All right. So you had that information, okay?
We did, yes.
Okay. And what would you say at the time of the survey, Courtney, in 1983, what percentage of the buildings contributed to the historic district at that time in 1983?
I believe it was 86%.
86%, okay. So we've lost quite a few of those buildings in that time. Well, it's been 40, 50
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So I'm sorry. So we've lost quite a bit of integrity over the ensuing years since then, and this is correct.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Courtney. This is Blair Davenport.
Hello.
Going back to the slide that lists the statistics of 512 properties and acres, your survey was just for those properties that are currently listed on the National Register form and does not include any potential or other properties to be considered, correct?
It was just the existing boundaries of the historic district.
And not any other properties within the district?
We surveyed we took photographs of every property within the district, and but we did not document or create those new properties that were constructed recently were not counted.
Or
If that makes
it does. What I was getting at is other properties or structures or features, such as cultural landscapes or walls or any of those kinds of potentially contributing features, which then leads me to my second question regarding criteria and why criteria D was not considered as far as information potential. If there are any ruins, perhaps, I'm not sure if you guys were searching for, again, features or historic resources that were not originally listed on the form, but could potentially be listed and located in the current boundaries of the historic district.
No, we were specifically looking at architectural features, properties.
Is that because of how the contract's written, or?
We were asked to resurvey the National Register nomination report, which also only looked at buildings. So that was not in our scope to review ruins or other features.
Okay, thanks. I think that was my only question for your slide on criteria. And I guess I wanted to know, where does the 51% come from? You said it was typically, is there some National Register guidance or anything that cites that it has to be at least 51%, or is there any other?
Yes, that comes from the National Register.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ma'am, again, it looks like you said. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You said there was 48% at this point, right, contributing. And the National Register says 51. So probably before you're through with this report, you'll probably come up with some other percentages.
It's possible, yes.
Okay. So what happens if we don't meet the 51? Then what happens?
We are just going to include the number in the report and not any recommendations either way for, moving forward with some type of action. That's entirely up to the city. However, those findings can be key, especially when you are pursuing a historic preservation plan, because this is when you have numbers that are very close to the edge like this, there can be recommendations included in the preservation plan for certain types of incentives for people to perhaps bring their properties back to contributing in some way, or more of an effort on educational information and outreach to the public before they make other changes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Courtney, it's Blair again. So I think you said you were not going to make a recommendation to the city regarding your findings. You're just presenting what your survey results were because, again, going back to originally, I was asking about other features, such as cultural landscape features, roads, trails, not really trails here, but lighting, walls, parks, those resources have not been surveyed. All that's been surveyed is just the architectural buildings. So there potentially could be other features that could contribute to the National Register form or to the historic district. Whether they have integrity or not, of course, that would have to be determined. But I guess what I'm asking is, if you do decide to make a recommendation as far as where this information will go in future planning or future updates to the National Register form, that it should include a survey of all potential resources, all cultural resources or historic resources within the boundaries that could contribute to the district and have a period of significance of between 1931 and 1945. As well as potentially if there are any resources that are not may not be within the district, but is it possible that there could be discontiguous properties that are outside the boundary that contribute? And I'm just thinking of the water line. The water supply to Boulder City came from Hoover Dam and extended 3 or so miles, and there are different features of that are still in existence, both above ground and underground. Some of them, there's a couple of buildings as well. Granted, they're not within the boundaries, but they are an important historic resource that's tied to not only the city, but to an important historic structure, which is the water filtration plant. So
that's an excellent point.
We can go on. If there's no other comments questions from the committee, we can move forward. Okay.
There's a little bit more of the presentation. I just wasn't sure if there were more questions on that one slide before I move forward.
Well, maybe I guess to ask Blair's final question: is it possible, although it's not the scope of your work, is it possible that these things could be added at a future time with additional scope? It could be added to the our nomination for the historic, significant. Could those things be added? I mean, is it possible to add those features that Blair has recommended
Absolutely.
as contributing? I mean, it doesn't have to be just architectural or properties, right?
Correct.
That's correct. Okay, thank you. Because I think that would be, really the thing with historic preservation plan could include those things that could add those elements. This could be part of our plan to enhance our historic stature by adding more points or adding more elements to it. Okay.
Correct. And as was mentioned, the cultural landscape inventory would be the recommendation, and I think that would be a really worthy endeavor.
Right.
Alan, can you pull your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, Courtney.
Thank you.
Courtney, this is Blair again. Using the third slide, second slide? Criteria, third slide. You mentioned that your third bullet must retain sufficient historic integrity and up to 2 modifications. Will you make the distinction or, I guess, clarify the modifications, whether they're permanent or reversible? And does that have any bearing on the significance if those buildings can retain or currently retain or could retain significance to the National Register?
So permanent alterations are generally considered things that are removal of historic material. So if you remove a historic window and replace it with a window that is, say, a vinyl frame window or something, as opposed to leaving the original wood frame window in. that would be considered a permanent alteration, or removal of a porch, enclosing a porch that was originally a screen porch is a permanent alteration. Something like a aluminum awning over a window is not, that's reversible, or an aluminum carport is reversible. What we do is we look at kind of each building holistically, and some buildings may have only replaced their windows. And even though that's considered not reversible, it is also, it's basically one alteration that has occurred, and it's still considered contributing. But if you've removed the porch and the windows and reoriented the front door, which we see a lot, that's 3 strikes essentially, and that would make the building not contributing.
Well, for example, what about additions? I mean, it was very enlightening what was contributing, what was not contributing. And you had some examples on Denver Street where additions had been made to the house, let's say a kind of a patio or an additional room. Those would be considered permanent additions, although it could be, arguably, you could remove those additions, couldn't you? Or was that considered a permanent addition if you add a room?
You could remove an addition. There's been some removal of historic material in the process of creating the addition. Of course, each addition would have to be, reviewed individually, but sometimes it's a matter of massing. So, the original house or the original intention of the design was to have a certain massing, a certain symmetry to the facade, and right. If the addition really significantly alters that massing or the form of the building, then it's considered one of the strikes against it. It would be a non-contributing feature of that property.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, next slide. Well, you're ready for the next slide.
So I'm on slide 4 with the individual eligibility criteria.
Okay.
So essentially, this follows the National Register criteria. Once again, the period of significance would have to, the building would have to have been constructed between 1931 and 1945. Excuse me. It would have to possess one or more of the criteria that we mentioned before and retain most aspects of integrity, which include the location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And those are all standard. Those are the National Register guidelines. So following that, we have made some recommendations for individually eligible buildings. And once again, we did have more information on some of the commercial buildings than we had on the individual houses. So we were able to make these recommendations. There might be more as we're able to access more of the archives. So again, this is preliminary, but these are the 17 buildings that we recommended as individually eligible. And we're hoping that as we get more information, we're able to recommend some of the homes as well. And then, so the next four slides, 5 through 8, are our individual recommendations based on building type and year, pre-1941 and post-1941. And so if you have any questions about those, I'll be happy to answer them.
Hi, this is Blair. I guess, can you explain the 39 pending? This is going back to your list. You mentioned that there are 39 properties that are pending. Is that just as being contributing, or do the 17 that are individually eligible, are those part of the pending as well, or they're two separate categories of buildings?
The 17 that are individually eligible are considered contributing, so they're part of the contributing count. The 39 are just those that we're not sure about, and we want to do a little bit more research on. A couple of them we didn't have access to. The lodge at the top of the hill we didn't have access to. It's slipping my mind right now, but it's the home that's right next to the lodge. There were two of them that we weren't allowed access. So we'd like to try and see if we can get some sort of status on those. And then there were just some others that we just needed a little bit more information on. So those are still pending.
If you need some access to the lodge, maybe I can help with that. Or
Okay.
Any homes you don't have access to, I'm sure that I can at least, try and see what kind of access that you need.
Just to take a photograph, there was I was told that there was a gate or something, and our surveyors weren't allowed to get up to the property to take photographs.
Mm-hmm. There's a no trespassing sign and a no entry over there, but you do need permission to get up there. But we can get that for you. Okay.
So a few other buildings that I had questions about that's probably on your list, and that it would be the historic water treatment plant. Did you not have access to those files or records? Are you familiar with that?
Is that on the? I'm so sorry. Hold just 1 second. I'm sorry. There's so many buildings running through my head, but I do remember that when I thought that there was didn't that building have a large addition on it? There was some kind of alteration to it?
No, I don't believe so.
There
Nothing?
was, but
Okay.
it's historic, I think, or it's within the historic period.
Okay, I will look into that one. I can get that information to Michael Mays. I just don't recall off the top of my head what we had decided about that one.
Courtney, this is Michael. Certainly, if you have individual properties where you have questions or access concerns or you need more information, don't hesitate to reach out to me with those particular properties, and I can find information that we might have in our files.
Okay.
And I'll just repeat again, the water treatment plant is the culmination of the water system, conveyance system here in Boulder City, along with the tank that's on top of the hill, that's historic. Two of the first structures within the city, as well as the pipeline that runs beyond the boundary and down towards Hoover Dam. I noticed that churches were missing. And then, again, this goes back to my question about criteria of significance and criteria D, information potential. I think there's remnants of the railroad here in town, as well as just outside the boundaries. And then there's Highway 93, which is now called Nevada Highway, which runs through the city, the center of town. That road and other circulation features are not included, but then again, you were just looking at architectural structures, not necessarily landscapes or other potentially contributing features.
Yes, and also the parks and the rec building. Didn't that fall within that timeline? The rec building next door to City Hall.
Okay. Was that the former high school?
That was a former high school, yes.
Okay.
Which I believe was, that was in that period of time, wasn't it?
Yeah, then the original building certainly was historic, but of course there's a rather large addition, onto the rear of that, which I don't recall off the top of my head what year that was built. But if that was left off the list, that might have been why.
All right. And I agree with Blair as far as the churches. I know most of the churches were built in 1933, Grace Community, the Episcopal Church, which are still here. Those are the two oldest churches in town.
Courtney,
Okay,
do you
next,
want to continue with your presentation?
continue with the presentation.
Sure, just
Thank
making
you.
sure there were no other questions.
Yep.
Okay, so on slide 9, we have recommendations for further study, and of course, we have some feedback from the committee on a possible CLI with cultural landscape inventory report. But we were also looking at some other areas that are adjacent to the district for potential additional survey and possibly an expansion of the district. There is a large group of homes to the east of the district that were built within the time period. I tried to find in the original nomination why those weren't surveyed or included in the survey, and I couldn't find any information on that. So Northwind is recommending that, at some point, those properties are looked at. There's also a small kind of section at the southwest section of the district that's outlined in blue, and those also were built during the time period, some of them. Of course, extending the survey down Nevada Highway would be good to catch some of the historic motor court motels, and I know, Michael, you and I have talked about that in the past. And then possibly the entire Date Street campus for Bureau of Reclamation.
There's another area here. If you look on your proposed boundaries north of the city, Courtney, I see you've included the water tower there and the water treatment plant. But if you look over towards the east, there's another water tower there, just north of the eastern boundary. That was part of that same system that Blair was talking about. That was the second tank. That part of that water.
Okay, right. Dennis did mention that. It's not in the actual historic district, but we can make it a recommendation to be included.
The other areas along, Boulder City Parkway, I think we have to, recognize that there are a lot of important things west of that along Boulder City Parkway, near Bullock's Field. Including Bullock's Field and the hangar there, but across on Bullock's, at Boulder City Parkway, there is the old the Chevron fueling station, which dates from the 30s, 31, where the old train station used to be. But there are a lot of historic buildings along Boulder City Parkway. For example, right after Buchanan, where the proposed train museum is, just west of that was one of the first Ford dealerships in southern Nevada. That building is now the antique shop. But there are many buildings along Boulder City Parkway that are from the era that were not, built by the government, but built by private contractors. But they supplied the railroad, and was part of that whole railroad area. Fuel depot and things like that. But the original ticket office for the unloading of the fuel, the fuel that was coming on rails along there is still there, and that's from the 30s also. So, there's quite a few buildings in there that I think need some, I think that are important and that need some research and before, especially with the development that's happening now, now's the time to look at those buildings because I think a lot of them fall within that time period.
Oh, okay, I've taken note of everything.
Okay.
Courtney, this is Blair again. How will you treat buildings that are significant but are outside the period of significance? And what I'm talking about or thinking about is the National Park Service headquarters building.
She has that listed though.
Included. It's on Nevada Way.
But isn't it outside of the period of significance? It was built in 1955, 60 something.
Yes, that's a
Post
good question. We are struggling with that a little bit. So that might also be a recommendation to, if there's an update to the nomination, that there would be a possible expansion of that period of significance to go a little bit later.
Right. Could it be possible that would possibly add more contributing buildings to the district, wouldn't it?
Right.
Because I'm assuming, let's say, the individual eligible buildings post 1941, which is like the Nevada Drug Building, the Brett Running Realty, the where the barbershop is, the Boulder Bowl, those aren't considering at this time contributing properties, I would guess, because they're outside the period, right?
Right. Correct. So that's another thing. We're just sort of we're struggling with how to deal with those because we're trying. Of course, we always like to think positively about our the contributing numbers. So we're doing the best we can to see how we can make them fit. So we are. If for some reason we can't seem to make it work, then it will definitely be in our recommendation section.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Michael?
Courtney, with the ultimate data that you complete, will you have it in a Excel format? I'm just thinking, one of the things that would be helpful is for us to take this information and work with our GIS staff to spatially show, contributing, non-contributing, properties that were built after 1945, so that we could kind of map out those areas that could help guide us for future research, future determinations about expansion of the district, and have more information to kind of understand where the contributing and non-contributing properties are at, and where those that were constructed later are at.
Yes, absolutely. We are putting together a spreadsheet with all of that data on there, all of the property data that comes from the assessor's data as well. So you'll have the parcel numbers. SHPO has a reference number for each property that will go in there. We're breaking them up by group because the Janus report has them in several groups based on builders, time period, etc. So we will have that data in there as well. So if you just want to look at all the all of the 6 companies' homes, you will be able to find that within a couple of seconds. So that for sure. And I wanted to add one other quick thing. I forgot to mention that the Janus report also includes contributing properties that were outside of the period of significance. So I just wanted to add that. So normally that's not how you would do it, but so we're evaluating that and seeing how we want to move forward with that. But either way, we will if we decide not to, it'll be in the recommendation section.
Thank you. Okay, we can move on.
So the remaining slides are the contributing and distributing examples based on the groups that the Janus report had provided. And so if you have any specific questions, I wasn't going to go through every one of those slides unless you wanted to. I'm happy to if you want me to, but if you just want to ask any specific questions about any of them, that's fine too.
No, I think I found this kind of enlightening as far as, somebody who's lived in Boulder City for 28 years. You kind of like seeing some things that you figure are part of the town, and it's kind of interesting to see what is considered non-contributing, what homes are considered non-contributing I've seen them for so long, they're part of the neighborhood, but this is a very interesting view upon us. So I appreciate this look on these, your objective look at these buildings, so how they contribute, how they don't contribute. So this is, and just that point of view has been a great exercise, I think, worth this whole survey here. We're not judging beauty, we're judging historical significance, right?
Of course, because we love them all. We've fallen in love with every single one of them, so it's very challenging.
Right.
Courtney, this is Susan. Could I just make one little housekeeping suggestion for those sheets with the examples, group A, B, et cetera?
Sure.
I'm assuming that the text relates to the photo either above or below the text, not to the right or left of the text, but other people go left to right. And so if you could either use background colors or a border or little arrows to clearly indicate which text goes with which photo.
Absolutely. Did you want me to resubmit the PowerPoint with those corrections?
I don't think we'd need to do that. I mean, normally our policy is that whatever's presented to the committee is what gets put into our online record database. But for, if these examples in the end up getting included in your final report, then it should be cleared up for that.
Got it. Yes, absolutely. So I just wanted to add to that Greta Rail, who is my partner in crime in this project, she is an historic archaeologist and has completed numerous CLIs, cultural landscape inventories, and is happy to call in and address some of the questions regarding the CLI and archaeological features if you would like to discuss that tonight.
Unless, this is Blair, did she inventory them, or are you wanting to know if that it's possible?
No, she has not inventoried them, but she could answer some of the questions that I was not maybe able to answer as well as she could, some of your questions specifically. So I didn't know if you wanted to ask those of her. She could probably, she might be familiar with some of the archaeological surveys that have already been conducted, or at least how to find that information. So if you, or we could certainly present that information to Michael Mays and he can get that to you later.
Well, I understand what the process is. I guess what I'm asking is that it's considered in your contract to inventory them, I guess, or is that a future need? I guess I'm not clear on what the contract calls for.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was not in this particular contract, and it would be a recommendation for future study.
I guess I would be fine with if you're making the recommendation to include cultural landscape features and other historic resources to be surveyed for future update to the National Register. That's fine by me. And if you need more information from any of us who know what potential cultural landscape features there are in town, or we're happy to assist with that. And I understand the cultural landscape inventory process, so and the different features that go into them as far as considering, natural systems and features, topography, spatial organization. I'm just reading what I have for that. Of course, buildings and structures, but then there's signs and walls, vegetation, greenways, parks, play areas, gardens, all of those things, if you're making a recommendation that those should be included in a future survey for the purpose of updating the National Register, great.
Can I ask you a question? So what you're kind of addressing is maybe the potentially, let's say, Saco de Boer's land plan, the plan itself, and because it exists today in Boulder City, it contributes to the historical significance of the community, because we're still in the same plan, we still have the same streets and parks and things like that.
So cultural landscapes can be individual planned landscapes. It could be somebody's, I don't know, somebody's beautiful front yard in their home, or I don't know if it's the landscaping around any of his city buildings. But it's also, this is one of the features of the National Register form, and that is De Boer's plan. It was one of the first, if not, it was the first federally sponsored model city in the country. And so those features that he included, whether they're still here or not, that's the other part, to inventory and see if they still exist, and if they still have integrity, if his design of the landscape, and if those landscape features are still around, those should be part of the National Register form. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll just quote, he was, quote, a crusader for beauty and quality of life in the urban experience. But, so anyway, none of those features, as far as I know, are included in the current National Register form. It's just structures, it's just buildings. Right. It doesn't include his ideas for landscaping or the roads or the circulation of where, and as well as the spatial design of where he had the homes, where he had the government buildings, where he had the churches, where, there's a spatial organization of that isn't discussed and within the current National Register, and it's not part of this current inventory as well. Right. So it should be.
Okay, I agree. And other things, and we have talked, but I'm sure this is not, it's outside of your scope because you're dealing with architecture, Courtney, but there are things, let's say, Wilbur weeds, plants that may still exist. Even to demonstrate, there's one significant place, is that he had a little demonstration garden park place right next to the park there, that little, the Joshua tree and the ocotillos there, those were Wilbur weeds, kind of like demonstration garden for drought tolerant desert, and that's still there. As a matter of fact, actually, there's like 3 locations there that have that little. There's a thing that Wilbur was, that we aren't adding to our cultural resources here. Okay.
And I'll just say, I know that at least there's a couple of federal buildings, Bureau of Reclamation, their administration building, when they're looking to update their landscape and their lawn, right? And so there's that question, what's historic, what's not historic? There perhaps is some inventory information that they have, Courtney, that would help, at least with that landscape feature for that building. But I know they had to go to the SHPO to determine could they yank out the lawn or replace it with some other vegetation. So it is a feature that's considered. It's just not necessarily identified or listed or highlighted in the current National Register form, and it gets lost.
So it's my understanding that cultural landscapes are not a property type, which is probably why it's not included in the original National Register nomination form. Cultural landscape inventories are a separate, as you know, process than the National Register process. And so that's my guess. But again, my coworker can certainly, she's happy to call in and answer any questions about that if anybody has any.
So with a little bit of research I did, if you were to use the Nevada State Architectural Resource Assessment form, there is and this is the long form, not the short form, but there's a box to check for landscape. And it's for a non-archaeological site. And then you can go on to describe that as an accessory resource. And there's information about how to identify those accessory resources and that landscapes, I'm quoting their instructions, the landscape should also be described as the surrounding environment, environment, I should say, often played a role with the historic period and can affect integrity, setting, feeling, and association. So were you planning to use the long form at all, or you're just using the short form that does not have that landscape box on it?
Correct. With our discussions with SHPO, when a property has been previously documented, the short form is all that is required.
So for a future recommendation, then I guess that's one of the recommendations, or your recommendations should somehow, I guess, identify that discrepancy as far as how do you identify landscape features? Is it within the form or a whole other cultural landscape inventory? Maybe there's a number of different ways to, I was going to say skin a cat.
Right. Absolutely.
Did we want to have, do you think any of your other team members could chime in on that as far as being, I mean, it's one of the things that we have talked about. I mean, the planned Historic Preservation Day had talked about the Bureau of Reclamation is talking about using their lawn. Now that has historical significance for the community. It was one of the first landscaped area was the lawn, and the first 3 Thanksgivings of the community were held on the lawn, in the cool of the lawn. And there were, significant activities being held during that early period during the city's forming. So, I mean, this is part of who we are. I mean, I think that the lawn and the parks are an integral part of who we are as a community. Without those 2 things in the middle of this town, it certainly would be a different place.
And this is Blair again. I just wanted to, I came across some interesting archives that I'm happy to share or pass along. But again, the primary reason for the National Register form originally was its association with the building and construction of Hoover Dam. And it still is, in my opinion. But one of the things I came across was a letter from 1985 from the governor of Nevada to the keeper of the National Register. And he was taking on the suggestion from the SHPO at the time to the chief historian for the Park Service. But their recommendation at that time was kind of interesting. And this was when they were trying to, they were working on changing the status of Hoover Dam to a National Historic Landmark. And so they were going back and forth on what that would look like. But anyway, the recommendation was ultimately they thought that the Boulder City Historic District, which is listed on the National Register in 1983, should have been or could ultimately be included into one big giant historic district that includes Hoover Dam. And I thought that was interesting because I think it was showing the importance that Boulder City has to Hoover Dam and trying to maintain that continuity of importance and association. I'm not sure if they would do that anymore. I don't know what the keeper would think of some kind of a monster historic district that includes Hoover Dam and Boulder City. But anyway, I just thought it was worth mentioning that that's important to maintain that connection and should still be maintained. And perhaps that's then a recommendation, a potential recommendation to continue to keep that association within maybe an update to the National Register.
Okay.
Yeah, there are actually just going on with it. There are more, as long you're talking about the water the pipeline, the water treatment. Was interesting that what's still up there near that water tower is the old power lines that actually came from Los Angeles Power, that powered Boulder City and powered the dam. Those telephone lines those electrical lines are still there. They're wooden structures that are in the desert, but it's quite significant. Before they shipped power to LA shipped all their power and powered building of the dam. And so there's that dual relationship, but that is part of that historic corridor and relationship between Boulder City, of obviously the LADWP, all the way down to the dam.
That's definitely an important component. It's not just the houses that folks lived in, but there's an engineering component that is directly associated with Hoover Dam. And that
correct.
engineering is in the electricity system, the water system, sewage system, the roads, the railroad. All of those features, I think, should be identified
Right.
in the National Register form.
In the sense, the relationships of the original placement of Boulder City was basically the reason they chose Boulder City, because it offered them an opportunity to get to the dam, bring a railroad. They figured out a way to, and that's why we're 2.5 years ahead of schedule, they figured out a way to bring a railroad from Boulder City to the lip of the dam and bringing materials and equipment and things. And that relationship was really, we have a lot of them with Harry Up Crow, and what a great engineer, but part of it was just the logistics of the Boulder City and being able to supply materials to the dam was the strategic thing that made this thing happen 2.5 years early, ahead of schedule. So that's
And those are tangible resources that are still in existence, or some of those are still
right.
here that should be identified.
Okay, that's, anything else, Courtney?
Nope. I have nothing left of my presentation.
Are there any more questions or comments from the committee?
One comment, just to emphasize Blair's contribution there. I guess you're aware of our work that we did on the airport when we tried to get that into a historic district. We did quite a bit of work on that. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Bullocks Field Historic
Yeah.
District.
Did you hear me? I don't know if she heard me.
Courtney, can you hear us?
A little bit.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I thought the comment was directed towards another commissioner. I
Oh,
apologize.
no, I was talking to you. I just wondered if you were aware of our work on making historic district out of Bullock Field. We had done.
No, this is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, because that would be another area too that would have
Okay.
some historic significance. Michael could give you that information.
Okay.
Right, and I think the importance of that is, and Michael kind of talked about it with the motels, historic motels and things like that. But really, Boulder Highway, Boulder City Parkway, which used to be Boulder Highway, that's the historic district is basically the federal government's role and the 6 companies' footprint. But the other part of the story is private enterprise coming in and how they supported their effort. So the things along Bullock Field and along Boulder City Parkway currently is, the private sector coming involved with the project of the dam and that evolution. So that's an important part of our story, I think, is how the private sector interacted with the public sector. And that's what Bullock Field and the old railroad area and all those areas are an important part of our cultural resource. And I think this can be very important to us too, with the idea of the railroad museum coming in, is that we look at those historic resources in that area and we do our best to preserve what's there, because there's some significant buildings and structures there that people have been tending for years. and keeping them that way, including the old TWA terminal, which is now the Else Club, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Anything else for Courtney?
Anything else for Courtney, everybody? Okay, thank you very much, Courtney. This was it's a great presentation, very enlightening. It was just kind of an eye opener, and thank you. Good work. And you kind of need that other, it's like that other more objective perspective of what we have here, and then this has been very, very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, for possible action, discussion and possible selection of property for the Historic Preservation Award for 2020 and future date for Historic Preservation Day 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start off basically with the discussion of the award, which since obviously due to COVID-19, that didn't happen in April, and we didn't have HP Day in May as originally scheduled. So now the committee's talking about possibly having HP Day in the fall, which we'll discuss later. But that means, given that we did have the nominations for the award open for a few months and that closed in March, we have all that information for you, and there's no reason not to bring it forward to you now. So the committee may want to choose the awardee tonight, or if not, you can postpone that to the next meeting. But as the report indicates, there were a total of 10 properties nominated, with 13 nominations. Of the 10, one property, the Boulder Bowl, actually has won the award before, back in 2012. It was just nominated by a citizen, not the owner, and we informed them that they already had one before. But the committee didn't ever technically state a policy as to whether or not prior winners would be considered, but basically when that property won the award in 2012, it was just shortly after they did the major basically remodel / restoration, to really spiff up the building but keep its historic character. And there really haven't been any permits or changes since that time. So, it's the committee's discretion whether or not, you want to consider that one or not. But to briefly run through the nominations, and these were done alphabetically by street name and then number. So the first one is nomination number 1 is for 1305 Arizona, which is the old hotel and museum property. Nomination number 2 are the Ash Street Apartments, which are 508 to 526 Ash Street. Nomination number 3 is 525 Avenue B, a commercial building recently remodeled for the Boulder City Company store. Nomination number 4 is 504 California, the Boulder Bowl, as we noted. Nomination number 5 is the chapel behind Grace Community Church. It doesn't really have a formal separate address just for that building, and it was the only property where the inventory sheet in the National Register doesn't show this building because, of course, it shows the main church up front, the view from Wyoming Street, whereas this is the little building behind that you can see from California. Nomination number 6 is a house at 616 California. Nomination number 7 is a house at 628 California. Nomination number 8 is the house at 1342 Denver Street. Nomination number 9 is a house at 738 Park Street. And nomination number 10 is the Bureau of Reclamation's recent remodel of, I believe, what they refer to as their admin building. I'm sure members can correct me if I'm wrong about that. And all of the rest of the back information beyond these photos is included in the packet. Now, what the committee has done in past years in order to winnow this down to who you believe, should win the award this year is that I believe last year what we asked is for each of you to provide your top two by number. And then we go through that list and see how many of those come up more than once. And then narrow that vote down among, assuming you get, more than one number that might come up more than once, then we narrow it down by having you vote again. Unless you want to take some other method at that.
Let's see. I noticed that in the notes, the city council has recommended that we go down to one nominee again because of the budgetary considerations. I mean, personally, I feel like I don't think that the plaque or the model is the important part of this award. I mean, I don't think a budget is. It's really the original idea of the award was pride in ownership, and I think the committee came and decided that we should give two awards, one for a residential and one for a non-resident, so they kind of we're kind of apples and oranges a little bit, and I know that we wanted to. I still it's a little bit unfair to the people that entered. Into this contest, or whatever we want to call it. That there were expected to be there was no.
No, it was never advertised that there would be
A
the
residential and a
consideration
commercial?
of, no, because we didn't know at that point if it would be approved by council. So nothing at all in the information that went to the public implied there would be two awards this year.
Okay, except in our minutes, I guess. That'd be the only thing, right? We discussed.
True, it'd be, the only discussion of it was at these
Okay.
meetings.
I don't know
Is there
how.
any reason we shouldn't go ahead and have a second award anyway? Maybe the certificate, we could provide a certificate in place of a plaque,
Well,
for the
the idea is
commercial.
that one award gets a plaque and the other one doesn't.
Right, well, I don't think anybody would be disappointed with being recognized.
Yeah,
There is traditionally a plaque for a residence, so it would be a nice gesture to the business nominees to be recognized also. It'd be a simple thing to put together a certificate of
Well,
an
as
award.
a point, I mean, non-residential buildings have won the award before too, so it's not as if the plaque has only gone to homes in the
Oh,
past.
right, okay.
Certainly Boulder Bowl
Yeah.
and, there are other examples in there.
I guess that would be something I would want to propose, is that we do provide a certificate, and whether the plaque goes to a residence or to a business, we could figure that out most ourselves.
Or is it possibly appropriate, listed to get a private donor for a second plaque? I mean, I don't think it's an excessive amount of money. We do have a sponsor. If we could find a sponsor for a second plaque, would that be appropriate? Or does the city council not want to have two awards?
To be fair, and I think Michael can expand on this, but I believe the discussion came up before COVID-19 ever happened. So budget, I don't believe, was the issue because,
Yeah, going back to the discussion when it was raised before the council during one of the budget workshops, the feedback was focus on one award and something to reevaluate in the future based on the feedback by the council at that time. And trying to recall what some of the council members said, whether they had expressed any input on commercial versus residential. I think the general sentiment was kind of just focusing on the existing program. But certainly, it's up to the discretion of the committee from your selection standpoint as to if you want to give a certificate to a second applicant. Or, you have the primary award and you have also, I want to call it an honorable mention, but you could provide a certificate for a second recipient.
And in the event, as Alan suggested earlier, possibly finding somebody to sponsor the award and pay for a plaque. I mean, we're putting off Preservation Day till October or November, so I think we've got enough time to maybe try and sort something out, you know, rather than do it all tonight. I mean, we don't have to decide tonight, do we?
No,
I would concur with that, and as well as add that, would it be better to have a full committee, have 5 people, to make the decision?
I don't think, is there a motion? I guess I'm asking for, I would like to see, you know, I would love to see 2 awards myself, just because, I mean, that's mainly because that's how I've been thinking about it, kind of a commercial, non-residential, more of an institutional, which is kind of a different playing field than, let's say, an individual homeowner who has a lot of pride in what they've created, you know, passion in what they've created. And both those organizations have passions, but it's kind of a different place. And I think that talking to Alan Stromberg about the original intention of the award was to create pride in ownership and pride in going the extra mile. You know, that's the intent of the award. It's not even the best of, it's just doing, you know, criteria. And I would, you know, feel better with 2 awards if we.
I think it would do a
I
lot
would
to
too.
promote historic preservation if you were, if a homeowner was getting an award and a business, you know, the residential and the business district, if it will serve our cause well, I think, and maybe stir up some competition amongst the business owners and also residential.
I agree. I totally agree.
Saying that, I don't think we have to make the decision tonight. I mean, we don't have to vote on it, but I'd like to at least maybe come up with a, you know, do we need a motion to say, you know, we would like to have 2 awards, I mean, with or without the plaque or whatever. You know, I think those our intent in the beginning was to create pride in what have they done. And I think we had looked at this as a individual homeowner and an institution or a business. You know, let's promote both categories. Because, you know, we feel like we always kind of leave, I mean, you know, we always feel regret we're kind of leaving somebody out that, you know, it's a great story or something like that. So maybe could I have a motion for 2 awards we can take a vote on it?
well, the committee already previously made a motion that they wanted 2 awards.
awards.
So I think if you could be more specific as to, do you have an idea that one would get a plaque and then the other would just get the certificate? And do you want to distinguish now which category, or do you just simply want to stick with, you want 2 awards, residential and non-residential, and you'll decide at the next meeting who gets a plaque in addition to who wins?
Right, we could look for a sponsor for the plaque or
Yeah.
something like that in the meantime.
Yeah, in the event we have no sponsor, then we could,
We just have certificates.
Okay.
You know, I think it's really the pride of,
I think we should just have them do a coin toss up here. You know,
yeah, I mean, they're all great, they're great nominations,
Yeah,
you know,
they're
it's
really
like,
good. All of them are.
little
I
bit
look
of
at all the
COVID
nominations,
humor.
there's so much passion
Hard decision.
and love in all of these nominations, you know, that, you know, you can see it and you can feel it. And, you know, you want to give awards to every one of these people that were nominated. To me, you know, this was a great group of nominations. I think it's one of the best we've had. And there were a lot of passionate people doing a lot of great, you know, from the country store to reclamation to 342, you know, Denver. And I think it's the 3rd time she's,
Yeah, that
entered
one
it.
house, that's been.
but it's a beautiful home, and it's, you know, and if you looked at
Is.
what I think is significant about a lot of our nominations, a lot of them were cited by Courtney, independent upon, you know, if they were doing awards of if you look at contributing buildings in her list, I think we have at least 3 of them already in there, right? Wonderful recommendations. So I think this is, you know, pretty exciting myself.
I kind of wonder if instead of just 2 awards. This seems like such a unique year for all kinds of reasons, but they were all really good. There's been a delay. Historic Preservation Day is delayed. I mean, is it possible that this year we consider all of these winners? I mean, granted, one gets the plaque, but
Celebrate these people.
just like let's recognize them all somehow. They all get certificates, in my opinion.
Well, this may be taking it out of order a little bit because this kind of goes into the next discussion about the date for the Historic Preservation Day and the purpose of Historic Preservation Day. I hope I don't pull it too much out of order, but we can. Is that I'm kind of rethinking Historic Preservation Day, and this is like I mean, I've heard this several times in the past. Hope is not a plan. So we can hope that this can all go over, and we're at this point. It's like when I was thinking about this, it's like, well, it really. It's not going to be up to us how we can meet in group, and it's all going to be about, where we are with a vaccine or a cure, or, even, October, September might not make a whole bunch, we may not be encouraging events throughout the year. I mean, it looks like until, we get certain clarity. There's no clarity right now. We're kind of hoping and crossing our fingers, and maybe we should look at, and even the people that volunteered to participate in this year's Historic Preservation Day is still questionable on if they're still willing or able to participate, or are they comfortable participating in the same way we were. I think we still have to kind of query those people of what they may be comfortable in. But perhaps my thought was kind of changing the emphasis of the day to more, especially after I saw Courtney's presentation, is more of an educational day where we can present the thing of the Northridge report and talk about, maybe more of a concentrate on an educational day, I want to call it, on historic preservation rather than an event.
So to bring it back to the award, I think what we need to keep in mind is we need to figure out how to recognize these nominations, these winners. They're all winners, in my opinion. And there are a number of different ways of recognizing them, whether that's with our traditional Historic Preservation Day. Perhaps we go virtual. Perhaps it's, a tour, a walking. There's a whole bunch of different options, right? But I just think that no matter what we plan for Historic Preservation Day, we're just going to make sure that whatever we decide for these properties is part of that event or that memorialization or whatever we want to call it.
Right, that's what I was thinking, that the event becomes more about their celebration and their appreciation rather than our day. Or, perhaps we could do virtual tours but something where we can talk about, where we can introduce the concepts. And I think this is the conversations we're going to get into when we talk about our strategic plan for historic preservation. It's like, okay, contributing and non-contributing. We have to have the public really understand what that means.
So going back to this, the awards.
Yeah, the awards.
Can we, I guess, we'll just go ahead or let's just decide that these are all completely worthy of awards and that they will be recognized during whatever event we plan for Historic Preservation Day.
Mr. Chairman, could I just bring up one point, and it would just relate directly to this. And I know in the past, one of your former members would often say that there were no, that the committee never established any criteria. And it's perfectly fine if you don't. And you may simply want to take the position this year that basically everybody who's proud of, their home can be considered a winner. But I'll just point out that at least one of the homes on the property is beautiful, has been nominated before, but the committee had clearly stated in the past that the remodeling that has been done over the years basically means that the home no longer looks historic at all, and it probably would be considered non-contributing because of that. And is that something, and I guess the committee just should be aware of that, if you make the choice to still honor properties like that that would not be considered contributing due to the changes, and if you make that choice, that's fine, just as long as you're conscious of making that choice. And I guess it's something to keep in mind then, if there's a certificate, how you want to word the language as the basis for the awards for those. And maybe that's where what Michael suggested as a category of honorable mention comes into play, or something for the enthusiasm and passion award, if not necessarily a historic preservation award.
And I did speak out of turn. I didn't mean everyone is technically a winner, because you're right. You're exactly right. There were some properties that do not meet the criteria, had won awards in the past. But many of them, there are a number that are just deserve recognition.
Right.
In addition.
I think that's the balance we're going to, our challenge as a committee to help the city council find a balance between how we've grown and how things have changed, and, how do we treat this? I mean, is it appropriate to a community, or is it not appropriate, And, I mean, these are important things.
I think we could choose one with the award from the city and then honor the rest of them with the certificate, because all of them are very good, So
Well, I'm
it
thinking
wouldn't
about.
be hard to do and wouldn't cost anything.
At the same time pointing out, I don't know if it confused the issues to say that we love this house, but it doesn't contribute, or, this house I mean, somehow, my intent is to kind of make this an educational, exactly, I'm thinking your point, Susan, exactly. It is somehow you have to say that, this is where the parameters are. This is what contributing, this is what not contributing, and this is what it means for our community. How do we judge these things, somehow, just to make this educational point come out without insulting people or, causing problems here.
What if we had a first, second, and third place, and on the day of Historic Preservation Day, we have a presentation and we discuss the houses, the properties, and then, we can point out the things that weren't contributing and the things that were, and, a lecture basically for people to learn about what's contributing and what's not.
Right.
But if, there's really one there that, probably shouldn't get an award. So, but yeah, we can't give everyone else one and not them. So maybe if we came up with a shorter list and then maybe work in honorable mentions in the way of pointing out the contributing features, and then also pointing out the ones that didn't, because really people need to know that.
Right. Right. I think that's our educational point of it. People need to know that. We need to educate them on, like I keep on telling my wife this, it's just because it's pretty doesn't mean it's historical. It's, it may look better. I mean, I'm not disagreeing that, certain properties look better with the changes, and, but, that's not our, what are our goals, and, what are, are we looking for things that are exactly contributing? That's why I look at, Blair's suggestion on landscape and cultural resources and land planning as part of our, I think that is part of our history, not just the buildings. Like I said, a lot of people, these buildings, these houses were built in 1933, and we live a little bit differently than, in 2020, definitely. Welcome to the 2020 than we lived in 1933. So, there's a story, there's a thing that happens there. But I think that's the question that the community has to kind of deal with. It really kind of gets down to what's appropriate, and what we think is appropriate. It's our
Well,
discussion in
we
the
had
future.
discussed before about a commercial building and a house. And then we could do that and then find a sponsor for the second plaque and give everybody else a certificate. Recognition or participation.
I'd be comfortable with that. It's
Well,
like 1, 2, well, they said 1, 2, and 3, but like 2.
I can make I'll make a motion. I move that we have 2 categories, one for house, one for commercial, and that we find a sponsor for the second plaque, and that we make certificates for all of the participants.
Do you want to be specific about commercial or just simply non-residential?
Non-residential.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're right. Residential and non-residential.
So then, we still come back to the fact that there's, on the certificate, what are you going to write on the certificate if the property is not contributing?
And just put
Then
certificate.
what kind of language can you,
Participation.
thanks for
I know Blair can come up with
participating.
something.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I believe the last couple of years, what you've had us do is, have the committee did a generic thank you letter.
Thank you letter.
That went to the nominator as well as the nominee. Basically, it was enthusiastically supporting that, they participated and
Right.
take pride in their property without, mentioning.
Right.
That sounds good. I'm good with that.
Okay, so
Okay, do we
so
have a
then it would
second?
be a plaque for residential, for non-residential, and then a thank you letter for the other
Or
participants.
certificate
With a certificate.
for all the other entries.
Okay.
But what would so you don't want you want a thank you letter and a certificate that kind of says the
Well,
same thing?
I'm kind of, like taking what Blair said, let's say if we take this Historic Preservation Day, let's say we have it virtual, and then we take possibly tours of these houses, and just talk about, this is a wonderful house, but this is how it contributes, this is how it doesn't contribute, this is the history of the house, little story of the house, just
PowerPoint, maybe.
like a PowerPoint, this is what I think Historic Preservation Day could be, and maybe we have the owners be part of this, a Zoom meeting or something like that, or.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, so.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, technically, when you have a motion.
On the floor.
You need a second
I need a second.
Yeah.
for the discussion.
Right.
Right.
You want to, and do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Is there any more discussion?
Now you can have discussion.
No, we're going to discussion.
I like the idea of the 2 plaques. I like the idea of certificates for those structures that are, let's call them runners up, or and/or they contribute. Those that don't contribute, thank you letter.
Okay.
Interesting.
Sounds good.
That's an
I like
interesting
that
way
too.
to do it.
And if we do some kind of a presentation, PowerPoint, Zoom, whatever, virtual tour, you could still include those properties that received a thank you letter
Right.
as part of the lesson.
Right.
Why they they don't contribute.
Right, the way they contribute,
So
right.
it's kind of
It's honest.
consider it a PowerPoint presentation on the hows and whys of a Historic Preservation Award in Boulder City. I don't know.
Right.
Okay, so do we have to amend that motion then that was made for Blair's?
Do
Yeah.
both Linda and Ray agree to that amendment for basically those 3 categories that Blair brought up?
I agree,
I agree.
yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously.
so we'll be
guys are
looking
great.
for a plaque sponsor.
We'll find a plaque sponsor. I mean, the plaque is $125, Susan, something like that?
I'll get back to you on the exact cost. It was a little lower this year because we did not have the year put on the plaque.
All right. No, we got to put the year on this year. I'm sorry.
Not happening. They're already bought and paid for. We have them.
Already bought and paid for.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we already got them. That's right. We got the awards. That plaque's going to be worth a fortune. It's the only one without the date.
So are we going to wait to nominate these?
Should we wait? Did you guys wanted to go with the nominations, or did you?
I would prefer waiting,
Okay.
but
So if we wait, then we've got to find a sponsor
Right.
for the other. Okay.
We'll find a sponsor.
Well, do you want to put this on next month's agenda, or do you want to let me know when you want it to come back based on whether you find a sponsor?
When would we have a new member, do you think? Would we have a new member by then, or?
The mayor asked that the second meeting in June be the meeting for consideration of the replacement member.
So you want to do, maybe consider this for the July agenda?
wait, what second meeting in June?
The second city council meeting in June.
That would be at the end of the month.
As a matter of procedure, I guess we'll, I guess personally, I'm still clear based on the council's direction previously, whether or not, even if I didn't get the impression it was a funding issue, just that the council preferred that the focus be on only one formal award. So even if you find funding for a second plaque, because how those certificates are written up is that the committee chair signs it, and the city manager and the mayor. So it just appears that what you're discussing, is in contradiction to what some council members indicated. But in looking at the minutes from that March 3rd meeting, it's not like there was a formal vote or direction given, just
Feedback.
input that was not favorable to having two awards this year.
But going back to the fifth position, we don't pick that person yet. Can you describe the process? People
Sure.
put their applications in, and then do we look at them? Does the city council look at them?
It'll be the city council that will make the recommendation, and so people will have an opportunity to submit applications up until the day of the city council meeting. And so it will be on the agenda, and the city clerk will list the names, and members of the council will then make nominations. And they'll close nominations, and then they'll vote on the nominations.
So if that occurs, second meeting in June, then our next meeting in July with that fifth member, that would probably be when we would choose
Right.
the award.
Yeah, I believe technically your meeting in June falls the day after the council would be choosing the fifth member. So we basically wouldn't have much time to bring them up to speed unless it happens to be a person, who's been following the meetings, for some time anyway.
Yeah, that meeting will be June 23rd, the city council meeting. And your meeting is on June 24th.
So we do it in July at the earliest, I'm thinking.
During July meeting then?
That works for me.
How do you, as far as the discussion, how do you guys feel about the city council's feeling that we should only stick to one? Because of the reasons we stated before, we think it's important for community pride to have two awards.
Are you suggesting we need city council permission to have two awards?
I believe, Michael initially took it to them as a budget discussion.
Yeah.
That wasn't the basis for their comments, however.
But they didn't approve the other things we had in mind either. They just kind of scratched that too.
I'll tell you what, let me circle back with the city manager regarding this. We
Okay.
have a little time until the July meeting, and I can provide further guidance regarding that.
All right.
Now, if the committee's done on that topic for now then, because it sounds like we'll bring this back in July, and in the interim, Michael will get a chance to talk to the city manager. The only other item, under item number 4, was whether or not you wanted to discuss having an alternate date for HP Day, but as Alan pointed out, even planning for the fall, there's no guarantee.
Right, and I sense some reluctance in participants, like, no one's sure, I understand that, no one's sure.
It's still kind of far away.
Yeah, everything's changed,
Still
well, it
kinda
seems
far
like it's
away.
far away, so you think it's like, but, I think that maybe it's a further discussion, we don't have to do it tonight. These poor people have been, this is only Wednesday for them, but, it's been a long week already, I'm sure. So we can discuss I would like to kind of have a little bit more time, if it's all right with you, just to discuss with the people that were engaged in this thing, a virtual event, just start planning for that virtual event instead of kind of the ideas of, rather than having these public events that we'll have to cancel or we'll have to have people,
So how would you have the virtual event? Then they would just go on the website, or?
Perhaps website, I don't, it could be smaller groups that, could perhaps be smaller events, maybe with some people, but that is filmed and streamed live,
Well,
or,
we've entered phase 2, which means 50 or more people can be together, as long as there's space and everything.
right.
Well, if we did go ahead and do a discussion on the Historic Preservation Award nominees and the contributing factors and the non-contributing factors, and that's something we could pre-record and
Right.
we could do with their participation even, and then not have to worry about doing it live on the day and technical issues and stuff like that. Maybe, that could be one part of it. Maybe some other things could be thought of in the meantime. And as a backup, in the event we're not doing an in-person preservation day. So,
Right.
we could have a number of things maybe pre-recorded if we needed to in the weeks leading up. We could probably put something together.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, pushing this discussion on to till the June meeting to say, okay, let's come up with some concepts here of how this meeting could happen and I just don't want to disappoint people, like you're planning things and we can't have it because of, this is that kind of, people's dreams have been blown up in any way. So rather than trying to plan something that may not happen, let's just plan something that can happen somehow, and
Well,
come
if
up
we
with
had
ideas for the
something
June.
virtual, I think people would certainly understand, with
Right.
the way things have been.
Right.
So, and plus we have to consider we're entering these different phases too, and who knows how long phase 3 is going to be. It just depends on the data and so forth that they
Right.
come up with.
Okay. So I suggest we just move, it's all right with everybody. Let's just think about this and then reconvene in next, June and we'll talk to our partners out there right now and see how they're feeling and, what they're.
I would suggest making that maybe a really big focus, I think, of our next meeting. And what I'm getting at is to not just concentrate on Historic Preservation Day, but what will outreach look like from here on out?
Right.
Because that is one of our tasks with the strategic plan.
Right.
And what I'm getting at is that maybe we don't do a Historic Preservation Day this year, like a day, maybe it's a week.
Right.
Full of different types of events that are not only meeting the intent of Historic Preservation Day, but what our strategic plan says about education and historic preservation.
That's what I'm
And
hoping.
so you know, there's a whole bunch of cool different ways of conveying that message, that education, or reaching out. It could be a whole bunch of different concepts. So if we could talk about those, like, I guess, start from scratch, maybe.
Well, for example, let's say Courtney's presentation and then Nevada Preservation Foundation's presentation. Part of their thing is they have to make a public presentation anyway, right? So we have to figure that out anyway. How are they going to make their public presentation? How is the public going to participate in this? Maybe if we pull it into a historic preservation week, spotlight that day or that week or whatever it is, that these things become not just another meeting that you have to try to schedule in, but this becomes a promoted, this is what we're going to do this week or this day. We're going to do we're going to tell you, we're going to give you the report on the update on the Janus report. We're going to give you an update on a proposed strategic plan at this time, and we're just bringing all those things that we're going to have to bring to the public anyway. Let's just make it what we do, our event, you know.
Do it anyway.
We have to do it anyway, and let's just make it, you know, just to make people pay attention to that event, because a lot of it be happening that week.
Well,
that day.
I do say we are proud of what we've done, you know, so far to bring all of this to light. I think, and you know, something that one of the gals that made a presentation, Stantec, okay. She made a point which I never really thought about. I mean, it just became clearer to me that our buildings are all being utilized for historical purposes. You know, I never thought about it in that way. I don't know why. I'm kind of dense, I guess. But, I mean, everything in the whole city is being utilized in a historical way. So the historic preservation is very important in Boulder City, because everything has been, you know, saved and utilized for the future. And even now, like some of the changes they're proposing, you know, so, and I'm really proud of the progress we've made so far to bring all this to light. And it's, you know, in my own life too, I'm learning as, you know, things. So I think we can be, you know, commend ourselves and then go to the future to do more, you know. And the people that have come to our meetings that are following historic preservation, I think they're learning a lot too.
Right. Okay. Any more? So we will move these.
Maybe come to our next meeting with some suggestions. Let's like all really plan some concepts, ideas, and let's kind of have a charrette, I guess.
Right. And then, we'll just try to make that meeting agenda kind of focusing on Historic Preservation Day. You know, we can worry about the details. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Should be very interesting.
Okay. Okay, we're in for number 5, for possible action, discussion on the status of the committee's goals and priorities and possible reprioritization. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we do with every meeting, we provide an update of the Historic Preservation Committee goals in a matrix form. I've highlighted in bold additional information for the committee, updates on the different objectives. Just wanted to briefly highlight a couple of those, and then if you have any questions. So under objective number 2, developing the historic preservation plan for the city. Of course, because of COVID-19, the second public meeting's on hold. As I've shared with the committee previously, the struggle is trying to identify a meaningful way to engage the community through the Nevada Preservation Foundation to take this to the next step with respect to that plan. Now that we are moving into phase 2, hopefully there may be an opportunity to have a public meeting within the next couple of months. But I will continue to be discussing this with Nevada Preservation Foundation about how best to move the plan forward.
Can I ask a question about that? Are they still considering an online survey or a non-meeting?
They were looking at different ideas, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I posed to them that's the challenge is, how do we reach that part of the community that isn't accessible, doesn't have access to the internet? So that's what they were trying to look into.
Right. Well, any ideas that, maybe we can discuss about how we can help with that process too, how, and this is what I'm thinking about in Historic Preservation Day or week or whatever we're calling it, is that we tie in some of these things that we have to do. I don't know if it's the end report or initial report or whatever, maybe we can help facilitate whatever that next step is for these projects that you're working on right now.
So, of course, we already talked about number 3. That was Courtney's presentation this evening. Under number 5, we wanted to provide an update. This is identifying financial incentives to promote historic preservation. Of course, with the creation of the Historic Preservation RDA grant, we are promoting that grant to people that are looking at making improvements to properties within the historic district. And staff met with the prospective tenants of the other half of the Browder building. This is the western half of the Browder building on May 18th and outlined and promoted the grant to those applicants. And so this is the concept for the coffee shop at the western end of the building.
Which they've included, just as a note, they include the name Browder Bookstore in
Oh,
their
really?
name
Oh, that's neat.
to kind of honor.
Question, because I think you offered it to another prospective recipient and they declined. And I was wondering, is there any feedback from why they didn't accept it? Is there something wrong with the guidance, or I guess what I'm wondering is, like, when you create RDA guidelines, how often do you have to look at them to see that they're successful or not, or need refinement? We just started it, so, and you've only had 2 potential applicants, so.
All right.
Right.
So I think part of it is timing for Big T's, the second applicant, because they were wanting to move forward with their improvements. And of course, we had, even though the committee had review and recommendations last fall, we didn't have approval from the council until the beginning of this year, and so I don't think the timing worked for that applicant. But certainly, as we reach out to subsequent people who are looking at making an investment within the historic district, and we hear feedback from them, I'll share that with you so you can better understand their reasons for moving forward or their reasons for not taking advantage of it. Because obviously, the intent is to use this as an incentive to encourage reinvestment in historic properties.
And thank you for putting a link to that grant program within the historic preservation page on your website. I think that was the only place it lived, or it didn't live there at all anywhere on your website. So thanks for fixing that.
Yeah, and just so the committee is aware too with our process, our economic development coordinator, Rafi Fasekjan, so whenever we have businesses come to the community and when they're proposing improvements, one of the things we discuss with them is potential tools that they can use because we see that as an incentive to the reinvestment within the historic district and within the RDA. The way I characterize the RDA is that if you've got a business owner that's looking at a couple of different properties to invest in, one is newer and one is older, it may be a disincentive to that investor to invest in the older property because there may be more significant costs. And so the RDA, and in particular, the Historic Preservation RDA grant, helps to level the playing field to encourage them to pursue that property. And so we're always reaching out to them early on to make them aware of the program.
Part of our education for Historic Preservation Day, we can talk about the RDA grant.
RDA grant.
Just
No, and I appreciate, I think it was the mayor that made the comment and moved the reimbursement level to 50%, which is a huge difference as opposed to a 30% for an RDA grant return. Now it's a 50% for historic, which I think is a big deal, you know, for protecting. And, you know, I'd love to see it work for the Browder Building. I mean, you know, can knock on wood. It's just, you know, we started kind of with the Browder Building, and it would be a great, you know, I mean, it'd be a great day when I see those buildings open up again and have life in them.
Oh, yeah.
And with the council's approval of the fiscal 21 budget last night, it does include $100,000 for the historic preservation grant.
Okay.
So it's still open for applications?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, item 7, developing an educational campaign that promotes historic Boulder City and encourages historic preservation. Several updates for the committee on this action item, this goal. So, you may have seen that the poster has been placed on the water filtration plant, and Susan put a copy of it in the packet for your benefit. SHPO has awarded to the city a subsequent grant for $4,200 that will help pay for the National Alliance of Preservation Commission's camp that helps to educate the committee and the public on the benefits of historic preservation. So we would schedule that for some time in 2021. And the city council, as part of the budget last night, did approve $8,000 for that camp. And so it will be offset by this grant by $4,200.
Oh, fantastic.
Also, SHPO is encouraging participation in a biannual conference. It's the NAPC Forum Conference. It was going to be held in Washington State in July, but of course, because of COVID-19, they're not moving forward with participation. However, they're going to have online sessions, and so one of the things, once I get more details from SHPO, is to apply for grant monies so that the committee can participate in that conference electronically. So that helps with education and promotion. So any other questions regarding the committee goals?
Everything sounds great as long as we have bandwidth, right, Holly? Right. Yeah.
regarding the poster at the water filtration plant, there's some problems with it. There's a different font for part of it that doesn't match. It's completely off. It's really weird. But also there looks like there's a quality control issue. Like it's unlaminating, delaminating, perhaps. You can see when you look at it, like it's kind of separating.
Looks like there's some kind of damage occurring.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of saw that. It's like a background. It's like it's like what you see is like the film, because I'm an old sign guy, and the glue that they put. You can see the glue strip behind it, and so whatever is in a certain light, you just see this glue strip that's coming up behind it.
I can certainly follow up with Public Works regarding that.
You said you were going to look into that panel with the artwork on it that Public Works took down. Did you ever just find out where it is? Or?
Yeah, I shared that with the Public Works Director, and so we'll just arrange to provide that to you. Yeah, oh yeah.
For you.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, you guys. I should have turned this off.
Any other question with the committee goals?
No, thank you. Okay, for possible action, discussion, update of status of properties in the historic district. Kind of gone over the Browder building. Good. I did, I want to compliment at least, that they've kept the lawn and the trees. I think the rec building looks great.
Yeah, it does. Nice improvement.
We still miss the trees, but it looks good. In 20 years, those trees will be magnificent. I just remember that when I first moved here about 28 years ago, they planted, that's when they're first cutting all the diseased Dutch elm trees, and we were so sad. They had put these little trees, and then, 20 years later, they're all big trees, so, it does happen, so, in the park.
So I had a question. Thank you for providing the covenants for the LADWP building. I guess what I was curious about is when it comes to the leasing of historic structures, city-owned structures, should the Historic Preservation Committee be involved in those discussions?
Certainly, if there was going to be any planned physical changes to that, we're going to go back to the guidelines that are established and provide the committee opportunity to provide input with that.
That makes sense. And when we looked at the draft lease or license agreement that was provided for the potential lessee, it did talk about changes. Kind of nebulously or wasn't very clear. So I guess in the future it would be nice to be kept informed when those types of leases are being drafted. And if they do make recommendations for changes that could potentially require adherence to the guidelines, I guess, for preservation, that we should be involved. It was kind of a wishy-washy lease, so...
I think you're referring to the landscaping provision that was in there?
It said landscaping, but it also said that they would provide a bathroom. So that's a major interior improvement. I don't think they were really counting on the chamber to install a bathroom.
Yeah,
or to provide bathroom facilities is what it said.
Yeah, the chamber was not representing any interior changes.
But that's not what the lease said.
Yeah, and there was no planned modifications to landscaping. But certainly, if there are going to be any contemplated physical changes to city-owned historic properties, that's the opportunity for the committee to provide input.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more discussion. Okay, for possible action, discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings. Anything we should add to our list at the present time? Okay.
I'll just clarify that per what you decided earlier, you want the discussion of the award to come back for the June meeting, the discussion of HP Day or other activities to come back for the June meeting, but the award won't come back to the July meeting. That's what you stated earlier, so.
That's correct.
So we'll reflect that on the next agenda.
And we have our fifth member, hopefully. Okay, now this is the, if there's no other additions, this is the second public comment period, second and final comment period. And the number out there is 702-589-9629. 702-589-9629. Public comment. We're still streaming, right? Let me check. Really check. Okay. Doesn't seem our lines are being overwhelmed at this time, right? We have more than one line coming in. Okay. How about a like? Okay, without any further, okay, without public comment, I think that's appropriate for comment. You know, I'd like to just personally thank the staff. Thank you guys for all your work and making this meeting happen. It's important that we keep government functioning, and I just appreciate you guys are here and you do this. And, you know, it's like a lot of us have been hiding in our little hovels, and you've been here every day making it work. So thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.